Good morning and early afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we have Michael Niehoff returning to share with us his insights, thoughts, knowledge on the latest in the education landscape as it's turned into an incredibly dynamic industry across the US. And when we were putting this session together, we did a lot of back and forth. And so the way that we really felt that we could describe our session the best is to say, you know, tech is the tool. Everything is about tech right now in classrooms and connecting with students. But Michael felt like it was really important to talk about what's actually transforming that tool into a learning apparatus, a functional learning tool. So, and it's the teacher and a couple other things. So I'll let him dig really deep into this topic. And on that note, because everything is changing so much and Michael is really on top of everything, and I'm sure that between, you know, our meeting yesterday and today when we're inviting all of you all to join us, things may have changed a little more. So we will take questions during the broadcast today, and I'll do my best to interject at an appropriate time and have Michael respond or share his thoughts. The other thing I think is really important to note is we decided that we're just going to go through all the content. So if you can't stay on with us for whatever reason, that's okay. You'll get a link to the recorded version, and you know we'll end this about an hour in, and so you can, you know, fast forward if you want to, or re-listen to all of it because it's pretty rich and in depth. I'm not really sure how I can't think of a better way to describe what we kind of went through yesterday. So I'm Liz Burkhart, and I'm the VP of Marketing at Agile Education Marketing, and many of you, work with us maybe always or occasionally for your different direct marketing and database projects. And so what we really want to do is bring in people who kind of offer insights and can really help inform your overall selling, business, and marketing strategies. So that's the purpose of Michael being here with us today. So if you have questions about, how can I use this to better connect with educators, that's a question we get a lot. Definitely jump in and he can share his thoughts. And I think just, he is an educator, so his point of view is from that stance. So I'm going to do a couple housekeeping things and then I'll turn it over to you, Michael. Everyone is on mute today. So if you have questions, use the box on the right-hand side of your screen and just type them in. I will be your MC today, as well as the behind-the-scenes moderator, tech moderator, and all of that. Again, you will get a recorded version of this in your email. And Michael graciously also will be sharing the slides. So we'll put a link to that as part of the package that we put together for this, because he has a lot of links to resources and other things that he references throughout and use to kind of put our talk together for today. Let's see. I think recorded session, and then and just remember the one thing we're doing really differently is asking your questions throughout. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Michael. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, I appreciate it, Liz. Good morning, everybody. It's fantastic to be here. Liz kind of mentioned, what the theme is about here, and I'll try to reiterate that best as possible. We all know that if you're in education these days, you really don't have a choice but be an ed tech person, I don't think. And I think a lot of us have been in the ed tech space ever since that really originated. And I started teaching 30 years ago, and was lucky to be in a classroom that we did start already even that long ago introducing technology. It was very different then and very limited, but I can tell you what the one thing that hasn't changed is the tools have obviously evolved and have gotten better and have gotten to be a lot more available, and I'd say even in many cases free or certainly limited cost compared to what things used to be. But what hasn't changed is sort of the dynamic of what we're doing with those tools. And so I'm someone who always has believed, like all of you do, if you're in education, that hopefully you're about empowering students, but I also think it's about empowering teachers. And if the technology is not empowering the teacher to be better or to do what they envision, then it might not be the right fit. So I really want to look at this idea of tech as the tool, teacher as the transformer. And I come from a perspective where in the end, it matters what are the outcomes, right? What are the students producing with the technology, and how is the teacher able to help facilitate to get high quality outcomes? So we're going to play around a little bit. My name is Michael Niehoff. I've already mentioned, been a longtime educator, been fortunate to work in a variety of educational spaces, longtime high school teacher, high school administrator, and I've worked at the community college level. But really what's probably been the theme throughout is I've just been very fortunate to be kind of dropped in different education spaces and been allowed the freedom to experiment with technology, been allowed to embark on different projects with different students. And that's just, that's kind of what it's about, right? It's continual evolution of learning in real time. So it's really fun for me to be able to share this. And I know that there's a lot of reasons right now to be, overwhelmed, sometimes discouraged, and hopefully sometimes still inspired. And so hopefully that inspired part is what we're still trying to do with students. And as educators, I don't think we can ever have enough inspiration. And maybe this last year has been a good example of we need more inspiration than ever, right? To kind of keep marching forward. And the tools are there, they're phenomenal. But we really got to figure out, how do we maximize and optimize those? So as Liz mentioned, there's a copy of the slides. Certainly feel free to snap a picture of that, but you're going to get all these slides and get this information in the link. So there are a lot of resources, and I want to make sure that, if you have a copy of these slides, you'll have access to everything. So that's kind of the idea. Again, tech is the tool, teacher is the transformer. I really want to be about this idea that we're empowering teachers. If we empower teachers the right way and support them, we hope that obviously it filters down, and the next iteration is empower students. We've been hearing in this last year this question a lot: is this the end of school as we know it? And I got to be honest, there's a lot of people that I know, including myself at times, that kind of sometimes hope, yeah, let's be really different. Let's be all the things that we know we can be and we want to be. And maybe school as we've known it is outdated or not relevant. But one thing that's not outdated or relevant is teaching, right? And facilitating, and good people being in front of students with good tools. That's still where the magic is. That's still what's necessary. So I don't know if it's the end of school as we know it. We've been hearing those things for a long time. I can tell you there's a lot of indications that things are, that the accelerated pace of change is going to keep happening. The pandemic, I think, was a great accelerator, but the reality is these things are coming, right? Jobs are changing, kids are changing, the world's changing, and the reality is we have to continue to find out what's going to be that magic connection, and what's going to get that best outcome that we're hoping to have with kids, regardless of where and what age level and what subject and what we're trying to teach. So I mentioned this a few months ago in a agile webinar here that was fantastic for me. But this gal is a huge internet sensation. If you're on Instagram and you look up Nandy, she is all over the place. And the reason I like mentioning her, I'm not even going to play the video, but the reality is Nandy is a self-proclaimed, self-propelled, self-created, self-evolved internet sensation. She's a young girl who lives in England who's just a fantastic musician. And she plays drums, she plays bass, she plays guitar, she plays keyboard. She's kind of a musical, phenom. But what's really interesting about her is just her confidence and her ability to just engage with an audience, that no fear kind of thing. And I don't know where that came from. I've been trying to actually connect and do an interview with her, and I'm determined to do that. But she's become famous. She's connecting with Dave Grohl, the Foo Fighters, and challenging him to drum challenges. And but the reason I think that I like to mention her is because all of us have students like this in our class, and we don't know that they have these skills or talents, or even if we are aware they have these skills and talents, we're not quite sure how to connect that to school. And that's sort of, I think, our challenge. What our mission is, not all of them are going to be as outspoken or as confident as Nandy, but I'm convinced that every kid has talents like Nandy, and our job is to tap into those and then optimize and maximize and give them a space to explore those and utilize those in school in some capacity. So we got to figure out how to connect English and math and history and science and literacy and technology to someone who has this passion and this interest. Because if we can really take someone like this and they can go as far as they want to go. And not everyone's going to be as famous as Nandy, but they can be as confident and they can be as engaged, right? This one I do want to play just for a few seconds because I just think this is too cool. So because I'm a Nandy fan, I felt like I got to find more Nandys, right? Well, this is Taj, right? He's 11 years old, and this kid is in our classes. I've met these kids before, and so have you. And don't get caught up in that it's guitar playing and music. It could be anything. It could be someone who starts their own company, starts their own nonprofit. They can be an artist. They could be a, you know, they could be a dog trainer. They're in our classes. They have talents and skills, and they're doing things with them in the real world. And I think what we have to do is embrace that in school somehow. Otherwise, their school life and their real life start becoming more and more separate. And I think we have to bring those together. So check out this kid, just the confidence in this kid. So first of all, when you've got videos with logos and a brand, he's already. See the confidence? Phenomenal. Okay, so we could obviously we could play Taj all day long, and that's not really the point. And see, I keep wanting to play them all day long, but the reality is this is, how do we tap into that? That kid's got confidence. He understands technology. He's got a YouTube channel. He's branding himself. He is performing. He is creating logos and graphics. And see if I can get this to skip here, right? And so my whole thing is, whether it's Taj or Nandy, we got to find these kids in our classes, and we got to connect with them, and we have to make them feel like their talents and skills are part of their education, are part of the school. They don't need us necessarily to pursue this, but I think if we connect this to school, and it doesn't mean that I want Taj to play guitar 8 hours a day in school, right? That's not realistic. But can I connect Taj's passion for music to what he reads, to what he writes about, to what he researches? Can I have him build music into his presentations or into his, other performances and showcases? And same thing with Nandy, right? So that's the kind of thing I want to think about, have us think about a little bit, is how do we tap into this and how do we utilize it? My fear is if we don't, a lot more kids are going to disconnect from school, right? Because they can do these things outside of school, and they can even start a career. These two are starting a very successful career. So anyway, I kind of want to move on to, a lot of us know the Greta Thunberg, Greta T, and I'm going to call it the Greta T effect. If you are looking around the world and see what kids are doing and how empowered they are, we have to realize that that they have this ability to connect because of the internet and because of technology. They can take their passions and their interests, and they can start doing things with them. Greta is obviously world famous. So Nandy's famous, but Greta is internationally famous, right? And we don't have to get into Greta's mission about climate change. That could be something that certainly is relevant. But in this case, what I'm talking about is if we don't connect Nandy's passion and her interests, we're going to lose her, because Greta realizes that she's got a mission and a cause, and she has the ability to go do this without us. But I would love to partner with Greta and say, how can we bring that to school? Okay. And if you're a teacher, I think, or an educator, an educational leader, you really have to admire when kids find that voice, right? And they find that connection, and they find that confidence. And she is someone who articulates this very well, right? And my whole thing is, I want all of my students to be like Greta, to feel this confidence, to realize they have a voice, and that they have power, and they have an ability to affect the world. Because after all, if we learn and we get skills and we get advanced in our education, what is that all about? What are we going to do with that, right? In the end, that's kind of why we go to school, right? Is because we want people to go out and do amazing things. And so we have to realize that they have this already there, and then our job is to tap into that. So I want all the students to have that Greta effect. And this is why I'm a big proponent of project-based learning and deeper learning, because I think we can connect kids' interests and their skills and talents to real-world challenges that are relevant and current, and they start seeing that their learning and their education becomes really, really important. So again, tech is a tool, teacher is a transformer. We do have to talk about technology because the reality is it's it's so dominant and so ever present. I know the last year has really showcased this or demonstrated this at an extreme level. But the reality is, like I said, a lot of us have been dealing with this for 25, 30 years, and certainly in the last 10 or 15 years, you've seen a huge influx of technology in our classrooms. Indeed, probably most public schools now are either completely a one-to-one environment where every student has access to a device all day, or they are moving towards that, right? And matter of fact, if they haven't moved there, there's already a little bit of a feeling or impression that they're behind. Well, the pandemic pushed that over the edge, right? Because schools had to make sure every student had a device, whether that was one they were providing or they had access to, et cetera. That's not counting the issues with internet and connectivity and understanding how to interact with all the applications and all the technology. But there's a few things in the last 6 months. I've been really fortunate to interview lots of teachers, K-12 teachers. So every grade level, high school teachers of math, high school teachers of history, English, et cetera, and then every grade level elementary. And these are some of the things that they're saying that they're really kind of coming to terms with about what their priorities are as far as education is free or low cost. So we have a lot of great technology that's free. And so, and certainly what a lot of them have is a free version and then a paid version that, and we're used to that model, right? Where a paid version gets us a few more, or in some cases, a lot more features or benefit. But the reality is there's a level where all of us can access it at free or low cost and use it. And then of course if we become more advanced or we start seeing greater benefit, then we might advocate for, hey, let's, this is really beneficial to us, let's really go to the next level. The other thing we're hearing a lot about is ease of use, right? We see a lot of workshops where teachers and educators go to learn technology, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the reality is, we're talking about people that have really limited time, are really stretched, and they have lots of responsibilities. And this goes back to their job is teaching. Their job is not to become a technologist. Now, there are teachers that love to become technologists, and that's fantastic. Okay, that's their personal mission. But that's not the majority of teachers. The majority of teachers are users of technology to do their craft, which is teaching. So they want it to be something that's fairly accessible and easy to use for them as well as their students. They don't want to spend a lot of time having to teach the technology again. And that's kind of a realization we have to come to terms with, right? So you'll see the popular tools and applications, a lot of times, they're really friendly, they're really easy. And we also know that kids are teaching the teachers half the time when it comes to the application, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, and that's a good thing. I have conversations with teachers all the time about you don't have to be an expert in the application. Matter of fact, let the kids become the expert if that's needed. You're the expert in teaching. You're the expert in assessment. You're the expert in the outcomes. You're the expert in coaching and facilitation and gathering resources and so on. We don't have time. You don't have time, teacher, I'm going to say, to become an expert in every technical technology tool. If your students become experts, fantastic. That just puts them in a different role, gives them confidence, gives them purpose. They can teach each other. They can teach you. That's super healthy. The one I also hear a lot about is, does it support equity and access? So any technology that has translation capabilities, big deal, right? And I'm in California, but the reality is no matter where you are in our country, English language learners is an important population that needs a lot of support and help. And so teachers are looking for things that have those kinds of things that can easily connect English language learners or special needs learners or anyone else that needs that additional support that's built into the technology, things that make things more visual, things that have audio, things that have, again, the translation capabilities. And so I think a lot of our more successful or smarter technologies are really building this stuff in because they know that's such a benefit for teachers and students. And the last thing I'm hearing more and more from teachers is they really want to see that it has a big bang in terms of the learning, in terms of the engagement, in terms of the final outcome, final products, final experience that kids have. So is it really something that we see kids having? They can't do this a different way, or if they do, it's not going to be as dynamic, right? So think about things that, obviously, things that produce video, produce audio, that are professional, and things that are used in the real world. We see these things, being replicated in professional spaces and jobs. So those are kind of things I'm hearing a lot about. and we'll mention a few. And so I'm just going to run through these. Again, this is not a technology session. And again, if someone wants to be a technologist, they can go do that, right? But I'm dealing with the fact that most teachers want to teach and they want to have the best result for their kids, but they need to find the best things to embrace. And these are the ones I'm hearing the most about from all teachers. And if they're a Google school and they're embracing Google Apps, what they like about the Google products is, again, typically, there's things that are free and low cost that are all built in. And probably the fact that things are fairly easy to use, fairly accessible, not super complex. Google Jamboard is kind of a newer one that's come into the Google tools and Google Apps that's gotten a lot of use during the distance learning part of last year, but teachers are realizing that's going to be a huge benefit. Again, this idea of being able to collaborate, making things visual, giving students options and choices how they connect. And that's probably what Google's done really well, right? They've given this idea, whether it's Google Docs or Google Presentations, the shared collaborative aspect, and probably the ease of use. Let's face it doesn't take a long time to figure out how to use these tools. I have an 85-year-old mother, and she's gotten pretty good at most of the Google apps. So that should tell you something, right? Okay, Flipgrid is one we're hearing a lot about, and I think, again, it's really easy to use, free, and it does a lot of things in a sort of a tight box, right? This idea that we can get students to respond, whether it's a quick assessment or an exit ticket or some sort of a reflection that we may have done previously in writing, which we still will do in writing, right? In a Google form or in any other type of format. But Flipgrid gives us that ability to capture voice, capture, kind of personality, capture video. And it's not that all kids are necessarily, as much as they're comfortable with technology, a lot of kids don't like to put themselves on video, especially in a school environment. But what's healthy about that is they're going to need to get used to doing that, right? We're all on video right now. So the reality is they have to, and someday they have to get used to this, right? It's not something that everybody loves to do, but it's something that we have to do, and we have to become proficient at it. So I'm hearing a lot of teachers, and boy, I'm surprised too. It's not just English teachers at the high school level, for example. I'm math teachers are using Flipgrid a lot, science teachers, elementary teachers like crazy. Again, easy to use, lots of benefit. And what I love about it is this idea of capturing in real time people's feedback, people's opinions, people's thoughts, people's voice. Pear Deck is getting a lot of attention. And again, this idea of the, free and paid versions, a lot of things with assessments, a lot of interactivity, a lot of feedback, a lot of focus on social emotional learning, and a lot of options to support all learners. Nearpod is also getting lots of attention. And again, this idea of lots of assessment capabilities, lots of interactivity, some pre-made tools. People like to have tools where they can create content, but also there's some content that might be provided. And the reality is teachers most often need or like both, right? And as they get more proficient or more advanced, either with a tool, subject area, or a particular, or in a particular subject area, or part of their curriculum, the more they will create content. But the reality is, especially in the beginning, it's really nice to have things that will provide some content for you, right? Because we're asking a lot of teachers to continually having to create everything themselves. And again, some people will do that from day one because that's their style, that's their mode of operation. But we got to be really sensitive to the fact that that's not where everybody's at, and that's not where everybody needs to be effective or be proficient. I wanted to throw this in because I talked to a math teacher a few weeks ago, and she was she showed me such great stuff about, and I'm not a math teacher and wasn't a very good math student, and I'm sure a lot of people here can identify with that. And so when you see things that kind of transform what math looks like and what the math experience is like, so this teacher was saying that Desmos, which is free, is that sort of thing. If you're doing graphing and that sort of work, it's literally so dynamic and so interactive and so easy and so powerful that it has that effect. And so apologize there. And so Krista Morales, who's a high school math teacher down in Southern California, she literally said, if you're a math teacher and you're not using Desmos, then shame on you. So, and I think she's saying it's so good and it's free that it doesn't really see that being an option. So So I think that's going to be kind of wrapping up the tools, and I really want to get into what kind of things people are doing with some of these tools, but more really about what's the power of technology when it really comes to when teachers design a really amazing, engaging, challenging sort of experience, and then use technology as a tool to get there. So again, teacher, yes.
Could I, okay, so there was a question, I think now is a good time for me to bring it up. Oh, there was another comment. So the comment relates to that last section, that there's a Facebook group for Jamboard. So that's like another way for teachers to learn how to use stuff would be go on social media and find, so thank you, Cassandra, for bringing that up. But the question was about IB personal projects, and just the, do you know of it? And what do you think of that kind of project for all ages? And I'm not familiar with IB personal project, but it feels like you're getting into where do you find, like, now we've talked about the tools, where do you find the content to actually create the project for the kids? And so that might be something that you could respond to.
Yeah, certainly. And I think when we get, I'm going to be sharing some actual, projects and student work and teacher, designed experiences here. But IB, International Baccalaureate, is a, is a particular program, if you will, or kind of a particular pedagogy philosophy, and they do lots of challenge-based, inquiry-based things that I would say fit very well into not only the project-based sort of environment, but they fit into definitely higher level thinking and giving students lots of ownership and real-world relevant kind of experiences. One of the things I like about something, I'm a huge believer in collaboration and know that it's really important for our students to have those experiences. And I don't just mean collaborating with each other, but collaborating with other adults, collaborating with professionals, collaborating with people via technology. But the reality is the last year has shown us that sometimes that's not the most accessible or even necessarily the best. So we have to be careful to say that, for example, that it always has to be a group project or always has to be collaborative. The reality is that there is room for individual projects. So I think this, IB does some things that are very much, focused, giving someone the individual challenge. They might have some unique way of doing things or some unique, kind of pedagogy or kind of instructional. But the reality is there's room for that for sure. And I think hopefully this is answering that question. But I'm for anything that gives students real world challenges where they have a lot of ownership and they get a chance to engage with other people, the real world. And what's funny is that you can have both. I think when we say collaboration, we always think that has to be peer collaboration. And we know there's huge value there and it's important. They've got to learn that skill too, because that's a workplace skill, right? But I also like collaboration with professionals, guests, experts, business people, leaders. And that's something in an individual project a student could still do. They don't have to be collaborating with peers to do something that requires collaboration. So if they have to connect with an expert in their community, whether that's online, on a phone call, could be a meeting face to face, that is still collaboration, even though they're doing an individual project. So yeah, I applaud anyone who's looking, again, there's some real descriptive things in IB that they have very specific expectations and sort of, but the reality is if it gets kids to do high level, engaging, significant work that they can buy into and do something that's powerful and personal, I'm 100% all for it. So I do want to mention a couple, since we're on the technology theme as well. These are just a couple of things I've ran across in the last year, and one of them very recently. And these aren't things that I'm using. These are things that I'm noticing that are out there that are small right now, but I think they represent a significant, not change, but evolution in education. So this first one is this Mastery Transcript Consortium. And what they're doing is they've developed, there's a lot of interest out there in moving towards a system that is more competency-based, mastery-based. So this idea of moving away from grades, moving away from standardized testing as a way to demonstrate learning. And we all know that the grade thing has always been flawed, right? And yet it's like still the dominant thing we've got going. Well, the universities, and let's face it, a lot of K-12 education is always going to be focused on, getting people ready for college or higher education or that type of thing. The universities are really starting to look at these models. And so Mastery Transcript Consortium is trying to create a system for high schools to develop that different kind of transcript, right? And I think this is where the world is going, and we haven't figured out how to do this yet, but this is where it's going to get there eventually. We know that grades and test scores are such a small indicator of what a student can do and what their value is, as a learner. And so this is all an effort to address that. And there are more schools, they're still small, that are looking at things like competency-based and mastery-based learning. And there are technology companies that are trying to develop the right tool to address that. So real quickly, if you look at that profile, they're trying to really give that larger snapshot of what a student has done, can do, will do, again, beyond grades and beyond test scores. And we all know, let's face it, I don't think any of us feel 100% comfortable that grades and test scores do justice to someone's learning or someone's abilities, but we haven't created something better yet, or at least something that has infiltrated the system enough, right? But it's coming. And there are colleges and universities now all over the country that are accepting portfolio assessment, so that when you apply to, and these are major colleges, not small private schools, major public institutions, so like UC Berkeley, Michigan, these kind of schools are developing a way to admit students based on portfolio versus a standardized test. So you're seeing that the SAT and the ACT took a big hit this last year with the pandemic, and it was already being beat up a little bit before then. And the colleges are sort of like ahead of this game. They're sort of like realizing those things might be the dinosaur that's about to go away. And so what are we going to replace it with? And when they decide to replace it with something, K-12, and especially high school, is going to have to have something ready to go beyond what we have now. The other one I want to mention, again, this is just something and this is one I came across very recently. This is very small, but I think this represents the future of what it's similar to what we just saw with the Mastery Transcript Consortium. So trying to develop that more, holistic, if you will, snapshot of a student. This one is focused on service learning. So what they've realized is we've always had service learning. And again, I'm kind of focused a little bit on high school here, but service learning gets into middle school. And there are definitely elementary students and teachers that do service learning projects. But the real world has long valued service learning. All colleges have always looked at students volunteer and service work as a way to demonstrate a lot of things that might help a student's case in admission, right? And so this one is called Treat 'em, and what they've done is focused on a service learning platform. So what they're combining is this social media platform that most of us, especially young people, are really attracted to, interactive, personalized, but focused on service learning, where students can go look for service learning opportunities and essentially connect with them via the platform. And also they can create their own service learning. So schools or a student that creates their own service learning event puts it in here. But the reality is what happens is, regardless of if it's their or their service learning event they created or locally, or one that they just got involved in that might be part of a national, international type thing, they get a transcript at the end of it that shows them a way to demonstrate to others the work that they've done. So again, huge value to colleges and universities, also to employers, scholarships, that type of thing, right? And once the student leaves school, they take this with them forever, and they enter into an open network, so they can keep their Treat 'em profile forever. Initially, it's done through the school, but this, again, looking at different ways to demonstrate learning and experiences. So portfolios, different kinds of transcripts. So that's just out there. Okay, so I really want to dive into, what this transformation part, right, and this teaching aspect of it, that we have all this great stuff out there. Back to where's the world going, and what do we really come down to? What are some of the essential foundational things that students are really needing, and what teachers are trying to address and meet? And this last year has really demonstrated that students crave connection, okay? If you talk to most students about what their most impactful teacher or class was, it was one that they connected with. And a lot of that is connecting with the teacher. So a teacher is so powerful because of the relationship and the connection, but also students can connect to the learning, connect to the activities, connect to the relevance, but they're craving that, right? And I know we think we hear a lot of things about young people that aren't necessarily always positive, and I think we trivialize and I think we minimize young people way too much, and that's kind of the Greta T effect, right? We have to embrace young people and promote them, but we have to acknowledge that whether it's the technology thing, the world, people crave connection, and we can get connection lots of different ways. But if we don't have the connection, it's going to keep us from doing anything else. So if you talk to any good teacher, and they'll tell you, I don't get anywhere until I have a connection with my kids. They don't do anything for me until we start having a relationship, a connection, and a rapport, right? So, and most teachers get that, and most teachers have figured out ways to build that connection. It's been really challenging this last year. I can share a couple of great stories of teachers that, and I might mention if we have time, things that I hear teachers doing online to build that connection with kids, right? So lots of check-ins, lots of trying to get to know kids personally, lots of time where we give 5 minutes to find out what's going on in people's lives, and we might capture that through a Flipgrid. We might capture that. I heard a great thing the other day, a math teacher who uses Flipgrid. When school starts every year, this is before pre-pandemic, he always all his kids do a Flipgrid just to pronounce their name correctly. So he has a video of them saying their name correctly. So when he says their name, he learns it from how they said their name. And it's so simple and so basic, but so powerful, right? And that's that connection kids are craving. They're craving relevance. The reality is when kids disconnect from school, it's because they're not seeing it as relevant, right? And some of that is on them, but a lot of that has to be on us, right? We have to be able to demonstrate the relevance that whatever we're doing and learning is something that goes on in the real world and has value. And there's lots of ways to do that. But if we skip that and just assume that, or say what a lot of us have heard over the years, you need this to go to college, you need this to pass this class, you need this because the state says so, you need this for the test. That's not relevance, right? That's compliance. And kids are craving this idea that what I'm doing has real value, right? And they're craving application. They want to do things. They want to see their work. They can't articulate this always, but they want to see the work that they do become something, be seen by people, matter, be valued, contribute to a larger cause. Seem like that whatever they do is going to be something that others, get benefit from. And again, they're not going to articulate it that way, but that's what the application part is really about. And then they crave an experience, right? If you look at what's going on in the world right now, that's probably the biggest thing happening, right? Is that people are desperate for experiences, and the pandemic has made that hard. And we're going to a lot of virtual or digital experiences, but the reality, there's also some things that have happened virtually and digitally that are phenomenal experiences, right? There's worldwide movements happening via technology and via social media and so on. Kids see these things and they know that again, they're not going to tell their teacher, hey, I need a really engaging experience, but that's what they're searching for. And there's lots of ways to get there, but that's what they need and what they want. And learning should be that, right? Okay, so it really comes down to whether it's the technology or the teacher. We're talking about pedagogy. We're talking about how we're approaching learning and what are the final outcomes? What does it look like? So I want to share a couple things. I'm a project-based learning, deeper learning proponent. This is a John Dewey quote, but this idea, if you look at all those things we just talked about, relevance and application and connection and experience, that's all rolled into this, right? If you do those things, that's when that thinking and learning happens, right? If we try to address those needs. And again, those aren't the things that show up in the standards all the time. Those aren't the things that show up on the test. They aren't the things that even show up in our vision statements, but these are things the world is saying that people need and that people crave, and that if they get those things, that's when they get to really higher level engaging learning, right? So we have a lot of things out there. I'm a project-based learning guy, but I'm really comfortable in career technical education, work-based learning. We have lots of names for these things: service learning, inquiry learning, problem-based, challenge-based, experiential. The reality is all of these are going after somewhat the same thing. They realize play-based learning is this great phenomenon that I'm reading all about what elementary kids especially are doing, outside, outdoors, playing with things, but the learning that comes from the brain development, right? Place-based learning, where we, again, go somewhere, do something, and strength-based learning, this idea of taking advantage of people's, strengths and skills and interests, and that's it. All of these are going after the same thing, right? And what you'll notice the commonality here, these aren't teacher-based learning. This isn't school-based learning. This isn't book-based learning. It's not test-based learning, right? These are all the ways we're trying to give kids and students and learners experiences to get to those all those needs and all those higher level thinking, all that connectivity that we're talking about. So I want to share a couple of real examples. This one I kind of want to dive into a little bit. This is an 8th grade project that I got a chance to see this year a little bit, learn about, talk to the teachers that were involved. And I won't go into a lot of detail. These resources will be available for you. Really, essentially what this was, they asked 8th graders this question: how can we change laws to make our society better for everyone? So this was kind of going on right during the election time, kind of post-election. And we know there's a lot of, during the election time, there's lots of anxiety, and there's lots of students have lots of interest in talking about politics. And we're always kind of like trying to figure out, oh gosh, we got to be careful. We can't endorse a political side or a candidate. How do we deal with this? Well, this is a way these teachers are finding ways to deal with that interest, right? Well, why do we have politics? Why do we have government? Well, one of the reasons we have government is to have laws and pass laws, create laws, enforce laws, right? So this question is asking us, maybe we have laws that need to be, by the way, laws get changed all the time, right? And we've had laws that have, have come and gone. We've had laws that have, so they're asking that question is, put it back on the learner, what laws should we change and why? The other thing that's important about this, though, is what they asked students to, the way they asked students to demonstrate that was through a podcast. And to me, this is the perfect merging of so many things. It's relevant. Kids are interested in what's going on in the world, and especially like in our society and politics, and they're hearing all the controversies. But what do we do with that controversy? What do we do with all those things? Well, laws is one of the ways. Is it perfect? No, but it's sort of the best thing that civilized society has created so far. But we know it can get better. And so how do we make it better? What are some broken laws? What are some laws that need to be improved, fixed, scrapped, changed? And then the way to demonstrate that or express that is in the form of a podcast. And podcasts have become really popular. They're really popular with young people, and I don't think we realize that. But they're popular across all ages. Obviously, people have different interests, but the podcast is a way to do so many things. There's writing involved. There's professionalism involved. There's lots of skills. There's, again, the use of voice, performance. There's lots of collaboration involved, great technology involved. And so I included several things here. The students had a project website. Probably the best thing is the podcast actually that the students presented. And then maybe we can capture a few seconds of the podcast. Again, think 8th graders. Professional use of music, right? Thinking audience, have to write, have to perform, have to research. Six weeks of studying when the students had to do this.
Hello, and thank you for rejoining Eileen Aguadulce's 8th grade podcast called Broken Laws, which is a 2-episode series. The first was released yesterday, Wednesday, December 16th, and our last episode is today, Thursday, December 17th, as a part of our learners' presentation of learning for their Broken Laws project. Learners have been working hard over the last 6 weeks, researching laws and studying the Constitution. We hope you
I'll play a
will
little.
enjoy today's episode as much.
See if we can. Well, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to have to probably not get into it, but the reality is that's there for people, and you're seeing that this is teacher facilitated and teacher challenged, but then the students ultimately have to come on and they work in groups to choose their law and present their broken law through the podcast. So I included a blog about the project, so you get a little bit of background, the project design guide. So if you want to see how the teachers kind of design this project or this activity, this unit, these lessons, and then the kind of the student outcome, student product. So these are, and again, we don't have time, but this is actually, well, I'm going to have, I guess, it's real popular now to do this word transparency and full disclosure. So I'm going to pretend like I'm somebody who has an important place in the world. So I'm going to do my transparency. These are actually from my wife's classroom. Okay, my wife is a high school English teacher, and she teaches at an alternative ed high school. So these are students that have traditionally not been necessarily the most successful or engaged in school, sometimes written off, certainly struggle with attending school, engaging in school, all the kind of traditional metrics that we do. And but what she does is a very simple thing, really. She does a 3-part thing. So she starts off very broad, and then they kind of get to focus in. But the reality is, she doesn't care what topic they choose. They choose, and what's funny is the topics they choose are so diverse and so interesting and so surprising in some ways, because these are high school juniors and seniors. I think these are all seniors, but I would think and I'm someone who believes in high school suits, but I still think if I went to the average high school senior and said, you get to choose any topic you want for a podcast, I don't care what the topic is. I'm looking at your writing, your research, your organization, and your script and so on. I would expect things about, like, and I'm going to be honest, I would expect fashion, sports, I don't know, right? How to pick up girls, I'm not quite sure, right? And these are the things they choose. Mouthfuls with Maximus. This guy talks about linguistics, right? This is a high school senior who, by the way, who has not been that successful in school, and it's absolutely phenomenal. Then this young lady talks about ancient religions, and then this one talks about kind of mental health and an approach to mental health. And that's what's great when you let kids choose their interest. You're surprised what their interests are, right? And as an English teacher, it's all about, the topic is not important. It's about them doing the research and the writing and the execution, right? But I do feel obligated to play a few seconds of this one because it's just so ridiculously professional. And again, this is without training or coaching. This really is, and they're using free tools, by the way, to produce these. We'll talk about that in a second.
Greetings and welcome to the introductory episode of Mouthfuls with Maximus, a podcast with the motive of learning, specifically about what comes out of our silly little mouse. For the first topics, we'll break down the alphabets and some linguistics, the Korean and Russian alphabets, starting with the primary language of the Great Republic of Korea, Korean alphabet.
Okay, again, in the interest of time, it's there if you need it. But I mean, first of all, super professional sounding. So again, we're tapping into some skills and abilities, and not all of the kids executed at that level in terms of the audio quality or the performance quality, right? Which is not necessarily the most important thing. It's a learning experience, right? But the reason this is powerful to me is one, the power of choice. And then of course teaching all the skills that are involved, but they have a product at the end that they can be proud of, and these are products that they see in the real world, right? And a lot of these kids will listen to a podcast and they're realizing, hey, I'm producing something that's like the professionals are doing. Obviously probably not as good because I'm not a professional yet, right? And we're not trying to turn them into professional podcasters, but the skills that they are using here are going to be so translate so well into so many careers. Think about when you have to give a presentation, or do an interview, or you may get asked to, put together some information for, regardless of the career you're in. This is a way, think about the skills that are involved here. But I also just love the fact that they will surprise you with these interesting, areas of interest they have and how they pursue those. So super cool stuff. And I just think that the podcast is a great example of merging free technology. You can publish it and share these things on social media, and you can, put them up at the website. You can put them in your portfolio, and people identify with them because the real world values this as a legit project, right? And yet you're learning all the skills and all the English standards and all the things that go into writing. And again, not taking anything away. I'm never going to say that students shouldn't write an essay ever again, but this is a version of the essay that they also need to do, right? And also should be able to do. And they've done a lot of essays in their careers, right? And they haven't all delivered the results that we wanted. So let's also build in some podcasts, right? As well as presentations and videos, or, there's lots of ways to get there. Okay, so I did want to include that there's a quick Google search gives you 20 free podcast tools. So again, this is, and by the way, my wife does not make podcasts. My wife doesn't even listen to podcasts. That's not important. She didn't need to become an expert on, the kids will figure out the tools, right? And And she gave them a primary tool that she thought was the easiest and best one. But the reality is here's 20 free ones out there. Tell the kids to go find which one works for them. I don't care how they produce it. What I'm going to do as the teacher, I'm going to give them the expectation of what's included, how they execute it, what is, it's going to have an intro, an outro, it's going to have music, it's going to have a script, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay. So a couple things I want to share with you, and we don't have time to probably go super in depth on these, but these are things that are happening right now in schools that I've been lucky to kind of be a part of in some capacity. So this was a February Power of Black History with 6th graders. Obviously Black History Month in February, a lot of people doing things with that. What was unique about this was they studied the Black history, but then the project or assignment became, not just research it and know the history and present the history. It's how does it relate to something that's going on now? And you have to choose an area of activism. So there's really a lot of interest now. This is what kids are dying for, is I'm going to study the history, but what am I going to do with it? What is it going to matter? So if you give them something to do with the history, like, hey, you have to become a proponent of, or an activist, or you have to take whoever you're studying in history and pick something to apply it to today. And by the way, that's not difficult to do, right? Because we have lots of things going on in the world that we're dealing with, that we've been dealing with for a long time, and these are reoccurring things. But now they can become part of, again, an organization, or they can become part of a cause, or part of a movement or a voice. And again, we don't care which ones those are, right? They're taking the history that we expect them to study and know, and then they're doing something with it. And this women's one is the same one. So March is Women's History Month, and we just had International Women's Day last, I think, a little over a week ago. And so this teacher decided to take advantage of March and do a women's history project, again with 5th and 6th graders. And the reality is, same thing. They have to learn. They have to pick a famous woman in history who was significant in some way and contributed to something great in our society. But then they have to take that and then choose something to do with that today. So they have to apply it to a current issue, and then they have to kind of commit to doing that. So it has kind of a service learning component, kind of a civic action component. But we're making history come alive when the project becomes, now I have to go do something with that, right? Knowing the history, learning the history is not enough. I have to take that history and go make something happen in my community. So, and that could be anything, right? But they're going to take whatever the issue, they studied a person in history, whatever that person did, whatever they were advocating for, however they became, successful or significant, then that's going to apply to some situation today. So I include the project design guide in there. So if you want to see kind of what the teacher was thinking about in doing this, but I'm going to go fast here. But again, this is not, now we're really getting into this is 2nd graders. This was one of the best projects I saw during the pandemic. The challenge was for 2nd graders to design a business, which is a common project these days, right? Kind of the entrepreneurial thing. And there's so many things that go into creating a business, kind of meeting a problem, solving a problem. And we learn about marketing, we learn about branding, we learn about, economics and finance. We learn, and these are all, but what was really cool was the businesses had to be about something that was going to, help the community through the pandemic. So, kids came up with all these really inventive things about what are people in our community need right now, whether it's certain kind of things with food, or, what are people craving? What are they needing? And how can we address that need, right now? So 2nd graders coming up with businesses and business plans. Again, lots of writing, lots of things going on there. But I love the fact that what makes it really significant was it's addressing a current need in the community, right? The pandemic caused us to have some new needs, some new problems that need to be addressed, right? And how can a business, address the needs and, of course, become a good idea and become successful? And then this middle schoolers making a difference with the compassion project, kind of a service learning thing. But this is one I wanted to mention really fast too. This is middle schoolers. We talk about stress and trauma and all the things going on with young people, especially, and not just during the pandemic. This has been going on for a while, right? And there's lots of causes for it, lots of theories, but the reality is our young people are really challenged by stress and anxiety and mental health issues, maybe more so than previous generations, right? And I always hear teachers say, well, what are we going to do about that? How are we going to address that? Well, how about make that a project? How about let kids design their own projects about how to help each other with stress and trauma, right? And so just some fantastic stuff there, and that hope you enjoy my dog. Isn't she wonderful? So again, students craving connection, students craving relevance, craving application, craving experiences. I do want to make sure we have, in case, I know we can go over the time a little, but we have time for some more questions or comments, that type of thing. I would love, we can go back into any of the projects if we think we have time there to share some of those. But and those are just quick examples of what's happening in the project world, right? So, and this happens to be all middle school, elementary school. So, and what I like about that is sometimes I think in education, we think that, oh, some of these things have to wait to high school or college, right? And the reality is, no, they don't. As a matter of fact, the earlier we start getting kids empowered this way and skilled this way, the further they're going to be able to go in high school and college, right? They're going to get all these skills down. So, Liz, what do you think? Do we have some time for some questions or comments?
So we do. So first, and thank you for doing some of this wrap up, because I feel some things came to me, and so I'll kind of play them to you. And I think that this can maybe help all of us who are more in the business of education really think about what you've shared and how we use it. Because basically we are serving the most of the people on who've joined us today. We serve the schools and the institutions and the colleges and the universities. And I think that one of the things that you said early on about trying to bring together school life and home life, and with our current situation, you know, it's physically been done for us. But like what you're saying is, how do we do that even when we are back in the classroom? And I think that that was a really powerful point that you were making. And I think that us as, you know, on the business side, you know, we know how kids can use these things. So what else can we do as organizations to support teachers? And this led into another really salient point that you made. What's the role of schools in today's environment? So all these tools are out there, they're free. The internet is just a wealth of information and knowledge. And so when everything sort of ends up almost by necessity having to be project-based application. And so as, you know, an organization, a business, whatever it is that we offer, framing it in the sense of how are you going to help that educator with that student outcome of, you know, meeting the need for connection, for relevance, and for application. So our communication strategies into schools and districts and with those education leaders really needs to change. And I'm sure that there are a lot of products and services that need to change, but I think reframing it can be really helpful too. So I think that's been one of the most powerful things that you've done today, is help us all understand how to think really differently about what we already offer, and how can we help these teachers see things a little bit differently that maybe they can use, you know, what we have, etc. So that was really powerful too.
Well, it's interesting.
Oh,
I think we have an opportunity, as we always do. You know, we're hearing that question a lot. You know, is school gonna be permanently changed because of the pandemic or something, right? The reality is technology is providing us lots of opportunities here, and I think you kind of made me think about this, is that the technology companies, the technology providers, the technology creators, the technology leaders in the education space can not only provide great resources and great tools and applications, they might be able to help push the innovation forward, in the sense that there is a shift that's happening. It's been happening. It's slow. It's sometimes almost looks like it's not happening, even though it is. I mean, there's lots of concerns about, you know, kind of not at school and education, not kind of keeping up with what's happening in the world, right? I think technology companies and experts and professionals and providers can help by demonstrating and showing how we can kind of push forward and create new exciting experiences with the technology for all learners. They can really provide not just a valuable service in terms of a product, but really a valuable service in kind of in that, you know, that shift that has to happen and in terms of pedagogy. And I think the reality is that education almost needs that. Like I think left alone, we don't have enough capacity to make that shift as fast or as effective as it needs to be, but that the technology providers, experts, might be able to be that tipping point. So, and I hadn't really thought about that before. I thought always about technology companies kind of responding to a need, and certainly technology companies are out front and they're thinking ahead. But I almost think like now I'm thinking like we really almost need them more as much to lead us to where it needs to go. Because even though I think internally education knows that this is kind of where it's heading, and like I said, we can call it a million different things, but there's some common things there, right? But it's almost like we need a tipping point in help, and maybe that's going to be the technology providers and products, because so far we haven't been able to make that shift enough on our own, right? And you know, and there's lots of people trying, and there's lots of institutional indications that that's what has to happen. Whether you talk to business professionals and industry, what they think the skills you need to have, whether you talk to economists, whether you talk to educational experts, but for whatever reason, we have a lot of great things going on, but they're still like the exception, not the rule. And I would hope maybe technology can help it become more of the rule and not the exception. So.
Yeah, that's those really good points. And we'll see. I mean, that's what everyone who joined us today is trying to do. But I also wanted to share with you a couple comments. So someone from Indiana University she was sharing with me some of the things that are going on in her world, like right now. And she was talking about that the more of like a portfolio, not just a transcript, and that is where that university is moving. And she's saying made it a bigger endeavor to actually go through all of these portfolios of these students versus just looking at some grades and some test scores. So what does that look like? And so she said they're weighing heavily on the essay. So you brought up, writing and podcasting coming together as really important skills. And then she was talking about at the college level, and we know this, but I think this is like a real world, real time, example. The enrollment is really low. And so, she's even asking, what are some of the things that are going to continue afterward with this, online distance learning, et cetera. And so I want to just point out, like, the enrollment thing, if there's a way as a provider into this space that you can position what you're offering as a way to generate student enrollment or retain student enrollment, that's huge. But what else? Maybe thinking about the higher ed side, are there any things that have changed that you think are going to stick moving into the next few years?
Well, it's interesting when I hear that. I agree with the person from Indiana University to this idea. So I've been saying for a long time, and I'll use the expression, it's a portfolio-based world, right? That's what the world is demanding from all of us, is a snapshot of what we can do. Where's our best work, right? We have resumes, we might have test scores, you might have that essay, but we sort of need a way to, the portfolio is this idea of kind of gathering all those things in a place. So now I've been saying for a long time that we have such great website tools, all these free website tools. I have a website that, I created myself. It doesn't mean it's the best website. It just means I can do it. It's free or minimal cost, right? But it's a place to put all the things that demonstrate not only what I believe in, but work I've done and et cetera, right? And so I really think that's and it's good to hear the universities talking about that. I think they realize that they're missing opportunities with some students and that narrow view of the test score and we know that industry values portfolio in the sense that I think private industry has always sort of looked at people beyond like their grades and their like their college. I mean, I hear companies like Google, like so many of their employees are like C students and this type of thing, right? They have philosophy statements they put out about that. There is some truth. I'm hearing lots of things about university and college enrollment being down across the nation. I think that's probably, we can attribute that a lot of it to the pandemic, right? But I think what we have to think about is there's a lot of worry about will those students come back? And I can tell you that we're hearing the same thing in the high schools across the country, and in urban areas, it's really bad. there's a large percentage of high school students that have been basically gone off the map, off the radar during the pandemic, and there's a big concern whether they're going to, if they're ever going to reemerge. Like, where did they go? Right? That we've just lost, and we can blame it all on the pandemic, and there's no doubt. But I think what we have to be aware of, that I'm afraid that students, whether they're college students or high school students, they're telling us something. They're telling us that there's it's not meeting their needs, or they don't see it being relevant enough, and they're evaluating their, maybe not in a real conscious way, but they're evaluating their futures and their opportunities, and they're not seeing school, whether it's high school or college, being the vehicle to meet that opportunity. And we could really go in some different avenues here, but I think there's a theme that we have to somehow, that schools have to really address that relevance issue, right? We can hide behind degrees and certificates and tradition, but the world is sort of like moving beyond that, right? And so whether it's a high school or a college or we have to sort of like move past this idea that people are going to come there because they're supposed to, or they're expected to, or society has told them to. So I think there's a lot happening there. I think everything from, and some of it's not good, right? Some of it is, that doesn't mean everybody's out doing successful things. That means a lot of people are just really frustrated, really lost, really confused, really disenchanted. But some of that's also people realizing that they don't need school to do what they want to do. So you don't need school to start a company. You don't need school to start your own nonprofit. You don't need school to become a professional at something, right? And so we have to be able to continue to demonstrate that that's relevant. And I think there's a lot of courses and a lot of experiences that students have that they don't feel like there's, they feel like they're just checking off boxes and lists, whether it's high school or college. I think K-8's a little different, but when they get to high school and college, I think there's a frustration and an awareness that's happening where students don't feel like it's, and I've been saying that for a long time, and I'm a high school person, so I've been saying that for a long time, is we got to be able to show, and I think the pandemic has just pushed it over the edge. Why? Because here's the situation. We have the ability, and have had now for several years, but now we really have the ability, college or high school, every student in America can go online forever.
Mm-hmm.
They never have to come to school, to a physical place, ever. And they can get all the degrees, all the certificates, all the, So if we think there's value in them coming to a place, a face-to-face interaction, which we know there is value in that, but I think we're going to have to demonstrate that to people. So I'm just speaking very anecdotally, but I'm seeing a lot of patterns there where, I think the high school kids in this last year have realized, hey, this online thing isn't always the best, but there's some advantages too. A lot more flexibility, and I can be home and do that versus, and so I've been advocating for a long time that we need to demonstrate to them, and and if we can't demonstrate that it has value, then we're going to get what we get, right? And so I've written about this and talked about this before too, that I think those experiences I described, that we saw a few glimpses of with the podcast and some of the projects, that's an experience that's harder to have all online or at home. Although you could do a lot of that at home. But so what's it going to be that, whether it's high school or college, what's it going to be that's going to make the face? So whether is it certain people we get to interact with? That's important. Is it certain equipment we have access to? Is it certain kind of environmental, cultural things that we have access to? Because if it's just the information, like if it's just I'm going to research stuff and write about stuff and read stuff, then I don't need to come to a place to do that, right? So, and I'll be the first one. I'm going to be honest. In higher education, I hope that there's a lot of really substandard teaching that happens in higher education as much as it does anywhere else. So there's a lot of people standing in a classroom talking to people for an hour, and that's it. Now, there's a lot of people not doing that too, but I'm saying there's a lot of higher ed has been a little slower to change, but high school is pretty slow as well. But we need to give them an experience. So it needs to be, and if you talk to students when they go through programs, what the things they identify with, the things that made a difference was I was with a really interesting group of people, at a really, engaging teacher, professor, facilitator, and we did some amazing things, right? But that's not happening across the board in every. So I don't know. And I may have a little bit of a gloomy view of that, although I don't think I'm too far off. And I think that we're seeing people, there's that old expression, right? People are going to vote with their feet, and we're going to see it, and I think right now I know that most K-12 districts in America, not most, a lot are developed. If they didn't have an online school before, they're going to have one now, because they realize there's a lot of students that's just going to be the way they go for lots of different reasons, right?
Yeah,
and I think in college that's a little tougher, but those are some things. But if the things I said matter, if people still are, if they're craving connection, craving, relevance, application, and experiences, and I'm not saying they can't get those online. They can, but we also need to show them that there are some things, incredible things that can happen, not virtually as well, right? So, but I'll be the first one to tell you that I think a large percentage of what's happening in too many classrooms, K-16, I'm just going to say it, across the country, can be done totally online. If it's going to be the way it is now, or has been, there's no reason for it not to be online. So it's almost like give me a reason that it's not online,
So that, I mean, that's,
I don't know if I'll be at university.
I mean, that's
no, but that's.
No, I think that that's fair, and I think it's yeah, it's an interesting thing to try to really take the emotion and the energy out of, and just think about it in a very practical way. So I think so. We got to our questions, and I can certainly let you kind of give final thoughts as well. But it also occurs to me maybe we could plan to have you back as the next school year starts coming up, like maybe May, June, and as we've been doing kind of the latest and greatest, and do another session and take some of these things that kind of teased out and came to us, and to see where are we at, what are we doing. I think that would be really valuable for all of us.
I have a working title: What School Could Be or Should Be.
Ooh, I like it. Okay.
That's
Done.
where it's at.
All right.
That's where it's at.
So I can stop for final thoughts. We've covered everything that came through.
Okay.
We did have some people who were able to stay with us, but we'll get the slides and the recording and everything out to everyone. But thank you, as always. I really appreciate your perspective and your candor on what's going on, and helping us as the service providers really think about what we can do to support the education that's happening in our country right now. So really, really valuable, really helpful.
I appreciate the opportunity, and I know it's going to be there's a lot of struggles ahead, but I appreciate all the people that are, whether on the technology or the education side, fighting the right fight. So.
Yeah, thank you. All right, and thank you everyone for joining us, and for sticking with us. And look for the recording and the slides. And we'll be back in the next month or month after. We've got some other a little bit more business related, and then Michael, I'll work with you to put together a session in a few months to do another deep dive. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Liz.